I was 17 when I had what I still call the worst night of my life. I have never told the full story out loud. Not to my parents, not to my friends, not even to a therapist, but it has been 2 years now, and I think it is time to finally say it, if only to get it out of my head. My name is Tyler Chen. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. The kind of place where people still say hello when they pass you on the sidewalk and kids ride bikes until the streetlights come on. That summer, I needed money for a car. I saw a post in our neighborhood Facebook group from a family called the Hendersons looking for a babysitter for their 6-year-old son, Lucas. I had never babysat before, but how hard could it be? Mrs. Henderson seemed nice during our phone call. She asked if I had experience and I said a little, which was a lie, but she hired me anyway. I biked over to their house on Maple Street around 6 p.m. on a Friday. Mrs. Henderson walked me through everything. Lucas eats at 6:30. Bedtime is 8:15. Our numbers are on the fridge. She smiled and said they would be back by 11 from a wedding across town. Lucas was sitting on the living room floor building something with Legos. He looked up at me with big brown eyes and waved. Mr. Henderson grabbed his jacket and they both headed out the door. I waved goodbye and thought to myself, this is going to be easy money. At first, everything really was fine. I heated up chicken nuggets and fries for Lucas and we ate together at the kitchen table. He told me about his favorite video games and how he wanted a new bike for his birthday. He was a sweet kid, quieter than I expected. After dinner, we went to the living room and played Mario Kart for about 45 minutes. I let him win twice. Around 7:45, I noticed Lucas kept glancing toward the basement door in the kitchen. It was just a white door with a silver handle, nothing special about it, but he kept staring at it like it might open on its own. Finally, he looked at me and said, "Can you check if the basement door is locked?" I thought it was a weird request, but I said sure and walked over. I twisted the handle. It was locked. I turned back to him and said, "All locked, buddy." "Why?" He shrugged and said, "Sometimes I hear noises down there." I tried to sound reassuring and told him it was probably just the water heater or the pipes. Old houses make weird sounds. He nodded but did not look convinced. Around 8:15, I took him upstairs to his room. It was covered in superhero posters and had a shelf full of action figures. I read him a Spider-Man comic until his eyes got heavy and he finally fell asleep clutching a stuffed dinosaur. By 8:30, I was back downstairs on the couch scrolling through Instagram. The house felt quiet, too quiet maybe. That is when I heard it, a muffled thump from somewhere below me. I paused mid-scroll and listened. Nothing. I figured it was exactly what I told Lucas, just the furnace or something shifting in the basement. I went back to my phone. But then, 15 minutes later, I heard it again. This time it was louder, a heavy sound like something being dragged across concrete. My chest tightened a little. I put my phone down and stood up. I walked slowly toward the kitchen where the basement door was. The door was still locked. I stood there for a second, hand on the handle, listening. Silence. Then I remembered something. Mrs. Henderson had left a tablet on the kitchen counter. I picked it up and saw it was open to a security camera app. I had not realized they had cameras. I tapped on the screen and saw a list of camera feeds. Living room, front door, backyard, and basement. I clicked on the basement feed. The screen showed a dark room filled with storage boxes, a washer and dryer in the corner, and a set of wooden stairs leading down from where I was standing. For about 30 seconds, nothing happened. Just a still image of a creepy, unfinished basement. Then I saw it. Movement. A shadow in the far corner near a stack of boxes. It shifted slightly, just enough for me to notice. My heart started pounding. I told myself it was probably just a rat or maybe the camera was glitchy, but I kept watching. The shadow moved again, this time closer to the stairs, and then I saw the shape of a person. Someone was crouching down there. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My hands started sweating and I almost dropped the tablet. I kept staring at the screen, hoping I was wrong, hoping it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. But then the figure stood up, fully. It was a man wearing dark clothes, and he was looking directly up at the camera. I stumbled backward and almost knocked over a chair. My mind was racing. How did he get in? Was the door really locked? I checked it again. Yes, still locked from the outside. That means he came in some other way. I tried to think. The Hendersons had a walkout basement. There was a door that led outside from the basement. I had seen it earlier when I looked out the back window. He must have come in through there. And now he was inside the house. I stood frozen in the kitchen holding the tablet trying to figure out what to do. Call the police, grab Lucas and run. Then I heard it, footsteps, not from the basement, from the hallway near the back of the house. Slow, deliberate footsteps. He was no longer in the basement. He was on the main floor. I heard a door close softly somewhere near the home office. I looked back at the tablet. The basement camera feed was empty now. He was gone from the frame. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I had to move. I had to get to Lucas. I crept toward the stairs as quietly as I could. Every step felt too loud. I kept glancing over my shoulder, terrified I would see him standing there. When I reached the top of the stairs, I heard the footsteps again. They were coming from the hallway below, slow and deliberate, like he was searching. I slipped into Lucas's room and shut the door as quietly as possible. Lucas was still asleep, his little chest rising and falling peacefully. I locked the door and looked around the room for something, anything. I spotted his dresser. It was small but heavy enough. I pushed it in front of the door, trying not to make noise, but it scraped against the floor. I froze, listened. The footsteps stopped. I knelt down next to Lucas and gently shook his shoulder. He stirred and opened his eyes, confused. I whispered, "Lucas, I need you to stay really quiet, okay?" He looked at me, scared now, and started to say something, but I put my finger to my lips. He nodded, his eyes wide. I pulled out my phone and my hands were shaking so badly I almost couldn't unlock it. I texted my friend Jake. "Someone is in the house. Not joking. Call 911. He replied instantly. "Are you serious? Call them now." I dialed 911 and whispered into the phone, "There is someone in the house. I am babysitting. We are locked in the bedroom upstairs. The address is 42 Maple Street." The dispatcher asked me to stay on the line and said officers were 4 minutes away. She told me to stay quiet and stay hidden. Lucas started crying softly. I pulled him close and whispered, "It is okay, the police are coming." But I did not feel okay. I felt like I was going to throw up. That is when the doorknob started to turn, slowly. My entire body went cold. I grabbed a baseball bat that was leaning against Lucas's closet and stood between the door and Lucas. The doorknob jiggled harder now, like someone was testing it. I heard breathing on the other side, low and steady. I yelled out, "The police are coming. They are almost here." The jiggling stopped. For a moment there was nothing. Then I heard a voice. Calm, quiet, almost friendly. He said, "Open the door." I did not respond. I just held the bat tighter, my knuckles turning white. Lucas was sobbing into my shirt. The man pushed against the door, hard. The dresser shifted a few inches and I heard the wood creak. I screamed, "Get away from us." The dispatcher was still on the phone asking if I was okay. I could barely answer. Then I heard it, sirens, faint at first but getting louder. The man must have heard them too because the footsteps suddenly retreated. Fast, running down the stairs. I heard the back door slam open, then nothing. Just silence and the sound of sirens getting closer. I heard shouting from downstairs, "Police. Is anyone here?" I yelled back upstairs, "In the kids' room, we are okay." My voice cracked. Lucas was still crying. I was still holding the bat. An officer came up the stairs and knocked on the door. "Sir, it is the police. You can open the door now." I moved the dresser and unlocked the door with shaking hands. The officer looked at me and then at Lucas. "You two all right?" I nodded, but I could not speak. He told us to come downstairs. "It is safe now." We went outside and I sat with Lucas on the curb while officers searched the house. Another officer asked me questions and I told him everything. About the camera, the shadow, the footsteps, the voice. He wrote it all down. Mrs. Henderson was called and she said they were on their way back immediately. 3 officers went through the entire house. One of them came out of the basement holding a black backpack. He opened it in front of me. Inside were granola bars, a blanket, a flashlight, and a notebook. The officer flipped through the notebook. It had dates written in it, entries going back 2 weeks. It looked like someone had been coming into the basement regularly when the family was not home. There were notes about when the lights went off, when cars left the driveway. The officer also pulled out a stack of printed photos. They were pictures of the Henderson family, at a park, at a grocery store, outside their house. My stomach turned. The officer looked at me and said, "You did the right thing, kid. You kept him safe." But I did not feel like a hero. I felt sick. I felt like I should have noticed something sooner. Another officer came over and said they found pry marks on the outside basement door. That is how he got in. They were dusting for fingerprints. The Hendersons got home at 10:45. Mrs. Henderson ran to Lucas and scooped him up, sobbing. Mr. Henderson shook my hand and kept saying thank you over and over. My parents showed up about 20 minutes later. My mom hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. That night I did not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that shadow on the camera screen. I heard that voice saying, "Open the door." The next few days were a blur. The police kept investigating. They ran the fingerprints and got a match. A man named Derek Cole, 34 years old. He had prior convictions for stalking and burglary. They arrested him 3 days later at a motel about 20 miles away. Turns out he had been watching the Hendersons for weeks, planning something. The police would not tell me exactly what, but the detective said I probably stopped something much worse from happening. The Hendersons installed a full security system after that. Cameras everywhere. New locks. They told me they would never leave Lucas alone again, even with a babysitter. They paid me for that night even though I told them they didn't have to. I never babysat again. I could not do it. Even now, 2 years later, I still get anxious when I hear doors closing at night. I check locks twice. I look over my shoulder more than I should. My parents said I should talk to someone about it, but I have not been able to. The worst part was reading in the local news a few weeks later that Derek had been watching 4 other families in the area. 4. We were just one of his targets. I think about that a lot, about how close we came, about what could have happened if I had not checked that camera, if I had ignored the sounds, if I had opened that door. I will never forget the sound of that doorknob turning, or the way his voice sounded when he told me to open the door. Calm, like he had all the time in the world. Like he knew I was scared. That is the part that still keeps me up at night. I used to think kids just had wild imaginations, that their creepy comments or strange obsessions were nothing more than phases that would pass with time. I never questioned it much. Not until that November night in Naperville, Illinois. Not until I spent 4 hours with Marcus Thompson in that house on Birchwood Lane. Now I know better. Some kids see things we choose to ignore. And sometimes, what they see has been waiting in the dark far longer than any of us could imagine. I was 19 years old, a sophomore at College of DuPage, picking up babysitting gigs around the suburbs to help cover rent. I had worked with a handful of families in the area, mostly through referrals from neighbors or friends of friends. The money was decent, and most of the time the kids were asleep by 9. Easy work. That Friday evening in early November, I got a call around 5:30 from a number I did not recognize. The man on the other end sounded rushed, almost breathless. He introduced himself as Mr. Thompson and said he got my number from the Hendersons, a family I sat for pretty regularly. He explained that his usual sitter had called in sick and he desperately needed someone for that night. He had an emergency at work, something about a system failure that required his immediate attention, and he would not be home until past midnight. He apologized repeatedly, said his son was easy to care for, and offered to pay double my usual rate. I agreed. He gave me the address on Birchwood Lane and thanked me 3 times before hanging up. I grabbed my backpack, told my roommate I would be back late, and headed out on my bike. The ride took about 20 minutes. Naperville is usually busy on Friday nights, but this particular neighborhood felt unusually quiet. The streets were lined with older homes, most of them 2 stories with narrow driveways and tall trees that blocked out the streetlights. By the time I turned onto Birchwood Lane, the sun had set completely, and the air had that sharp November chill that cuts through your jacket. The house was at the very end of the street, a faded gray-blue 2-story with chipped paint around the window frames and a crooked mailbox leaning to one side. The porch light was on, but the rest of the house looked dark. I locked my bike to the fence and walked up the cracked concrete steps. Mr. Thompson opened the door before I could knock. He was in his early 40s, I guessed, wearing a wrinkled button-up shirt and dress pants. His hair was messy, and his eyes had dark circles under them like he had not slept in days. He stepped aside quickly and motioned for me to come in. The hallway was narrow and dimly lit, with bare walls and a faint smell of old wood and dust. He did not offer me a seat or ask how my ride was. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, talking fast. "Marcus is upstairs," he said. "He's 8, quiet kid, doesn't need much. Just make sure he goes to bed by 9:30. I nodded. He pulled a business card from his wallet and scribbled a phone number on the back. "This is my cell. If anything feels wrong, call me right away. Don't wait." I asked what he meant by wrong, but he just shook his head and said it was nothing, just a precaution. Then he glanced toward the staircase and called out, "Marcus, come down and meet your sitter." A moment later, a small figure appeared at the top of the stairs. Marcus was thin, almost frail-looking, with messy brown hair and pale skin. His eyes were sharp and alert, but there was something distant about them, like he was looking past me instead of at me. He came down slowly, not saying a word, and stood in the hallway a few feet away. Mr. Thompson grabbed his coat from a hook by the door and pulled it on. "There's food in the fridge, snacks in the pantry, and one more thing," he said, lowering his voice. "Don't go down to the basement. The door sticks sometimes. Just leave it alone." Before I could ask why, he was out the door, walking quickly to his car. He did not look back. The engine started and he pulled out of the driveway without a wave or a second glance. I stood there in the doorway for a moment, watching the taillights disappear down the street. Then I turned around. Marcus was gone. I found him in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the carpet in front of a small pile of Lego bricks. The room was dim, lit only by a single table lamp in the corner. He was building something, his hands moving quickly and deliberately. I sat down on the edge of the couch and watched him for a moment. "What are you making?" I asked. He did not look up. "The man who lives downstairs." I paused, not sure if I heard him right. "What man?" "The one in the basement." I tried to keep my tone casual. "There's nobody down there, buddy. It's just us." Marcus stopped building. He tilted his head slightly, like he was listening to something I could not hear. Then he looked at me for the first time, his eyes serious and unblinking. "He's always there, he waits." A cold feeling crept up my spine, but I forced a smile. "Your dad said you like building things. That's cool. What else do you like to do?" He went back to his Legos, snapping pieces together. He doesn't like loud noises, so I try to be quiet. I leaned forward, trying to get a better look at what he was making. It was a structure that looked like a house with a door at the bottom. Inside the doorway, he had placed a small black Lego figure with no face. Marcus picked up a red brick and placed it on top of the figure's head. "That's him," he said softly, "Mr. Harding." I did not know what to say to that. I turned on the television, flipping through channels until I found a cartoon, but Marcus did not even glance at the screen. He just kept building, occasionally pausing to tilt his head and listen. Every 10 minutes or so, he would stop completely, his hands hovering over the Legos, his breathing shallow. Then he would continue as if nothing had happened. I tried to distract myself with my phone, scrolling through messages, but I could not shake the unease settling in my chest. The house felt too quiet, too still. Around 8 o'clock, Marcus stood up without a word and walked out of the living room. I heard his footsteps move down the hallway toward the back of the house. I waited a moment, then followed. He was standing in the kitchen, staring at a door in the corner. It was an old wooden door, painted white but chipped and peeling in places. A metal latch was bolted across it, fastened tight. Marcus stood about 3 feet away, his head tilted, his hands at his sides. "Marcus," I said gently, "what are you doing?" He did not turn around. "He's awake now." I stepped closer, my heart starting to pound. That was when I heard it. A faint sound from behind the door. Not a knock, not footsteps, just a soft, rhythmic noise like fabric brushing against wood. Like someone moving slowly in the dark. I told myself it was pipes, Old houses make noises, it was nothing. But then I heard it again. A low, steady breath, in and out, slow and deliberate. Marcus whispered without looking at me. "That's not a rat. Rats don't breathe like that." My throat tightened. "Marcus, is there someone down there?" "There used to be. Now he just stays." "Who?" "Mr. Harding. Dad says he was here before we moved in." I felt my stomach drop. "Your dad knows about this?" Marcus nodded. "Dad said never unlock the door, never talk to him through it, and never say yes if he asks to come up." The breathing stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the sound. It felt heavy, like the air itself was holding still. I reached out and grabbed Marcus by the shoulder, gently pulling him away from the door. He did not resist. We went back to the living room and I made him sit on the couch. My hands were shaking. I wanted to call Mr. Thompson, but what would I even say? That I heard breathing. That his son talks about a man in the basement. It sounded insane. I sat down next to Marcus and tried to steady my voice. "It's probably just the furnace or something. Old houses are weird like that." Marcus looked at me with an expression that was far too serious for an 8-year-old. "You don't have to pretend. I know you heard him too." At 9:15, I told Marcus it was time for bed. He did not argue. He stood up and walked toward the stairs, and I followed him up to his room. It was small and plain, with a single bed, a dresser, and a nightlight shaped like a crescent moon plugged into the wall. Marcus climbed into bed and pulled the blanket up to his chin. I sat on the edge of the mattress and tried to think of something comforting to say. "Do you want me to read you something?" He shook his head. "Just don't let him come upstairs." "Marcus, who are you talking about?" "Mr. Harding. He asks Dad every night. Dad always says no." I felt a chill crawl up my arms. "What would happen if your dad said yes?" Marcus stared at the ceiling. "Then he'd be up here with us." I did not know how to respond to that. I stood up, turned off the overhead light, and left the nightlight on. I told him I would be right downstairs and that he was safe. He did not answer. I closed his door halfway and went back down to the living room. I sat on the couch with my phone in my lap, staring at the screen without really seeing it. The house felt different now, heavier. At 9:40, I heard it. A low, drawn-out moan from somewhere below. It was faint, muffled, but unmistakable. I stood up, my pulse hammering in my ears. The sound came again, longer this time. Then a voice. Quiet, rough, like gravel scraping against metal. "Please." I froze. It was coming from the kitchen, from behind the basement door. I walked slowly down the hallway, my legs stiff with fear. The door was still latched, but from the gap beneath it I could see a shadow, the shape of feet. Someone was standing on the other side. "Let me out, please. I won't hurt anyone." My entire body went cold. I could not move. I could not breathe. The voice continued, softer now, almost pleading. "Just unlock it, just for a minute, please." Every instinct I had screamed at me to stay silent, to not respond. I backed away slowly, my eyes locked on the door, and turned to run back to the living room. My heart was slamming against my ribs. I pulled out my phone and almost dialed 911, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. That was when I heard the sound, a soft click. I ran back to the kitchen. The latch was still in place, but the door had shifted. It was open, just 2 inches, a sliver of black space. And from that gap, a cold draft spilled out, carrying with it the smell of damp earth and something rotten. I stared at the opening, my breath shallow, and saw movement in the darkness. A shape, tall, thin, something shifting just beyond the light. Then the voice came again, no longer pleading. "You're still here. Good, stay and listen." I heard footsteps behind me, small, slow. I spun around. Marcus was standing at the bottom of the stairs, his eyes half open, his face blank. He was sleepwalking, or something worse. "Marcus," I shouted, but he did not react. He walked toward the kitchen, toward the basement door, his movements stiff and unnatural. I ran to him and grabbed his shoulders. "Marcus, wake up." He stopped. His mouth moved, whispering something over and over. He said I have to open it. He said Dad isn't here. He said you have to let him out. No, Marcus, we're not opening anything. I pulled him back, wrapping my arms around him. His eyes suddenly snapped open, wide and terrified. He's angry now. The basement door slammed shut with a deafening bang. Marcus flinched, fully awake now, looking around in confusion. What happened? He asked, his voice small and frightened. You were sleepwalking, I said, pulling him away from the kitchen. But when I looked back at the door, I saw it. A handprint, black, wet, smeared across the white wood. The fingers were too long. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. My voice was shaking as I spoke to the dispatcher. There's someone in the house. I'm watching a child. We need police right now. The dispatcher asked where I saw the person. In the basement. The door was locked, but something's down there. She told me to get out immediately and said officers were on the way. I took Marcus by the hand and ran to the front door. I twisted the knob. It would not turn. I yanked it harder, panic flooding my chest. Why won't it open? Marcus whispered. I ran to the back door in the kitchen, my pulse roaring in my ears. As I passed through the hallway, I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, coming from beneath us. Not climbing the basement stairs. Moving under the floor, following us. The boards creaked and groaned under the weight of something moving below. Marcus squeezed my hand so tight it hurt. He's trying to find a way up. I reached the back door and yanked it open. Cold air rushed in. I pulled Marcus outside into the yard, stumbling over the uneven grass. I did not stop until we were standing in the middle of the street under a streetlight. I turned back toward the house. Every light inside had gone out, except for the faint glow of Marcus's nightlight upstairs, and in the kitchen window I saw it, a silhouette, tall, hunched, standing motionless, watching us. 5 minutes later, 2 police cars pulled up. The officers got out and asked what happened. I told them everything as calmly as I could. They exchanged a glance, then went inside. Marcus and I waited on the curb. It felt like forever. When they finally came back out, one of them shook his head. We checked the whole house, basement too. Door was locked from the outside. No one down there. But the other officer looked uncomfortable. He muttered something to his partner. Did you see those marks on the walls down there? I stepped forward. What marks? He hesitated. Just some old scratches, probably from previous owners. They tried calling Mr. Thompson. No answer. They called child services. Marcus was taken to stay with a relative. I stayed to give a statement and answer questions. By the time I was allowed to leave, it was past 1 in the morning. I rode my bike home in the dark, my hands still trembling. 2 days later, the police called me. They could not locate Mr. Thompson. His phone was disconnected. The company he claimed to work for had no record of anyone by that name. The house on Birchwood Lane had been sealed for investigation. In the basement, they found deep scratches carved into the wooden support beams, fingernail marks, and old records showed the house had once belonged to a man named Gerald Harding who disappeared in 1998. Marcus was placed with his aunt. 3 weeks later, I received a small envelope in the mail, no return address. Inside was a Lego model, a tiny house with a basement door standing open, 2 stick figures. One standing outside the door, one standing next to it. On the back, in careful handwriting, were 3 words. He got out. I almost didn't take the job. The ad was simple, handwritten on faded paper and tacked to the bulletin board outside the small grocery store in Whitefish, Montana. It read, "Babysitter needed, night shifts only. Good pay, call Mr. Richardson." The number was scrawled beneath in shaky handwriting. I was 17, barely scraping together enough for community college tuition while my mom worked 2 shifts at the diner. I needed the money, so I didn't ask questions. When I called, an old man's voice answered, trembling and tired. He gave me an address on Pinewood Road and told me to be there by 7 sharp. Then he said something that stuck with me. "Danny gets nightmares. Don't let him go upstairs alone after dark." I said okay, hung up, and tried not to think too hard about what that meant. The house sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, about 2 miles past the edge of town where the streetlights disappeared and the forest pressed in close. It was an old 2-story wooden structure with peeling paint, a sagging porch, and a broken fence half swallowed by overgrown bushes. The mailbox leaned sideways, the name Richardson barely visible. I pulled up just before 7, grabbed my backpack, and walked to the front door. Mr. Richardson answered on the first knock. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. Gaunt face, hollow eyes, thinning white hair sticking up in all directions. His hands shook as he handed me a wrinkled envelope stuffed with cash. "This is for tonight. I'll be back around midnight." His voice was flat, exhausted. Inside, sitting on a worn couch and clutching a threadbare teddy bear, was Danny. He was 6 years old, blonde hair hanging in his eyes, wearing an oversized sweater that looked like it belonged to someone else. He didn't look up when I walked in. "His parents died 4 months ago," Mr. Richardson said quietly. "Car accident. He doesn't talk much anymore." Then he pressed a key into my palm. "Lock the upstairs door at 9. Don't open it until I get back." He left without another word, his truck rattling down the driveway and disappearing into the darkness. Danny and I were alone. The house felt too quiet, like the walls were holding their breath. I tried to make conversation. "Hey buddy, what's your favorite subject in school?" He just shrugged. "Do you like dinosaurs? Superheroes?" Another shrug. He kept staring past me toward the staircase that led to the second floor. At 8:30, I made us spaghetti with tomato sauce from a can. Danny ate slowly, mechanically, his eyes drifting back to the stairs every few seconds. I tried not to notice. After dinner, I checked the time. It was 8:50. I remembered Mr. Richardson's instructions. "Come on, Danny. Let's go lock that door upstairs." He looked at me with wide, frightened eyes but didn't argue. We climbed the staircase together. The second-floor hallway was dark and smelled like mildew and dust. 3 doors lined the hall, all closed. The one at the very end had deep scratch marks gouged into the wood like someone had clawed at it. Danny grabbed my hand. "That's where they sleep," he whispered. I felt a chill run down my spine but forced a smile. "It's okay. We're just locking the door." I turned the key, heard the bolt click, and quickly led Danny back downstairs. By 9:15, we were settled on the couch watching cartoons. Danny sat stiff as a board, his eyes flicking to the ceiling every few minutes. I tried to ignore the faint creaking sounds coming from above. Old houses settle, I told myself, just the wind. But then I heard it, a soft thump, then another, like footsteps packing back and forth. Danny heard it too. "I told you," he said quietly. "I hear them upstairs." His voice was calm, resigned, like this was normal. I swallowed hard. "It's just the house, buddy. Nothing to worry about," but my hands were sweating. At 10, Danny asked to go to bed. I tucked him into his small room on the first floor. The walls were bare except for a few drawings taped crookedly near the window. He lay down but kept his eyes open. "Can you stay until I fall asleep?" "Sure," I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. After a few minutes of silence, he started talking. "Mom used to read me stories. Dad made funny voices." His voice cracked. "After the accident, Grandpa moved in. But he acts weird at night." I leaned closer. "Weird how?" "He goes upstairs when he thinks I'm asleep. I hear him talking to someone, and sometimes I hear a woman laughing, and kids running." My stomach twisted. "Maybe it's the TV." He shook his head. "There's no TV upstairs. Grandpa locked all those rooms after Mom and Dad died." Before I could respond, a loud thump, thump, thump echoed from the ceiling directly above us. Danny went rigid. "They're playing again." I jumped to my feet, staring at the ceiling. My heart hammered in my chest. The thumping stopped as suddenly as it started. I checked the hallway door, still locked. The key was still in my pocket. I went back to Danny's room and found him curled under the blanket, shaking. I sat with him, rubbing his back, until he finally drifted off around 10:45. I spent the next hour in the living room trying to distract myself with my phone, but I couldn't stop glancing at the ceiling. Every creak, every groan of the old house made my skin crawl. At midnight sharp, headlights swept through the window. Mr. Richardson was back. He looked worse than before. His clothes were dirty, mud caked on his boots. He was carrying a small shovel. "Everything okay?" I asked. He flinched. "Fine, just doing some yard work at midnight." The words came out before I could stop them. He didn't answer, just handed me an extra $30. "You did good. Can you come back tomorrow? Same time?" I hesitated. The money was good, but something felt wrong. Still, I nodded, sure. He glanced up the staircase. "Did you hear anything tonight?" "Like what?" "Nothing. Never mind, just keep Danny downstairs after dark. Always." I left at 12:20, my mind racing. The next morning, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. I Googled the address. 1747 Pinewood Road, Whitefish, Montana. The first result was a news article from 2019. Family of 4 found dead in Whitefish home. Murder-suicide suspected. I kept reading. A man had killed his wife and 2 children before taking his own life. The father of the killer, a Mr. Richardson, insisted his son had been a good man, that something was wrong, but the case was closed. My blood ran cold. Then I found another article from 2023. Tragic car accident claims young couple. 6-year-old survives. That was Danny's parents. I kept digging and found a local forum post. That house has history. 3rd tragedy in 15 years. I felt sick. That evening I arrived 30 minutes early. I walked around the property. In the backyard, near the tree line, I saw several mounds of freshly turned earth. A shovel leaned against a tree. My pulse quickened. "What is he burying?" At 7, Mr. Richardson answered the door looking frantic. His eyes were bloodshot. "Lock it earlier tonight, by 8:30. Is something wrong? Just do as I say. And if you hear anything, ignore it." He left in a hurry. Danny was in his usual spot on the couch. "He's scared too," Danny said. "Scared of what, buddy?" "The people upstairs. They're getting louder. I made soup for dinner, but Danny barely touched it." At 8:25, we headed upstairs to lock the door early. But when we reached the 2nd floor hallway, I froze. The door at the end, the one with the scratch marks, was open. Just a crack, but it was definitely open. I know I locked it last night. Danny tugged my sleeve. "Don't look inside." My heart pounded, but I stepped forward. I pushed the door open slowly. The smell hit me first, something rotten, putrid. I flipped the light switch. The bulb flickered. The room was empty except for dark stains on the floor and deep scratches on the walls. Then I heard it, a child's giggle coming from the closet. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and dragged Danny downstairs. At 9, we sat in the living room with every light on. Then the footsteps started. Tap, 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 clear and deliberate. Then a door creaking open upstairs. Creak. Then running. Thump, 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 thump. Danny started crying. "They want to come down." I pulled out my phone, ready to call 911. Then everything stopped. Dead silence. At 11:30, Mr. Richardson came home early. He looked terrified. "You're both still here." "Good." I stood up. "Mr. Richardson, what's going on in this house?" He collapsed into a chair and buried his face in his hands. "You heard them, didn't you? I saw that room upstairs." "What is this?" He took a shaky breath and started talking. "In 2019, my son lived here with his wife and 2 kids. One night he snapped, killed them all, then himself. Police called it murder-suicide, but I didn't believe it. My son was a good man. Something in this house made him do it. The house sat empty for years. Then my other son, Danny's father, died in that car crash. I had to take Danny in. I couldn't afford anywhere else, so we moved back here." He looked at me with hollow eyes. "I tried to seal those rooms. I tried everything. But the sound started 3 weeks ago, getting worse every night." "What are you burying in the backyard?" His face went pale. "You saw that? I found things. In the walls upstairs, bones, small bones, and papers with names. This house was built in 1923. I dug through old records. 7 children disappeared near this property between 1924 and 1931. I've been trying to bury what I found, trying to give them peace." Danny suddenly spoke up. "They told me their names. Sarah, Tommy, Ruth, Michael." Mr. Richardson stared at his grandson. "When did they talk to you?" "Every night. They come to my window. They want me to come upstairs and play." My blood ran cold. "We need to call the police." "And tell them what?" "That ghosts are haunting my grandson." Then it started. Bang, bang, bang. From upstairs, we all looked at the ceiling. Then singing. Ring around the rosy pocket full of posies. Multiple children's voices laughing and singing in unison. Mr. Richardson stood. It's never been this bad. They're getting stronger. At 11:50, the noises grew violent. Crashing, running, pounding. I picked Danny up. We need to leave. Now. Mr. Richardson grabbed my arm. No. If we run, they'll follow Danny. They've marked him. Danny was shaking. They want me to stay. They said I can be their friend forever. The lights went out. Only moonlight came through the windows. Then footsteps on the stairs. Creak, creak, creak. I shined my phone's flashlight toward the staircase. Nothing there, but the footsteps continued, coming closer. Danny screamed. They're coming down. The upstairs door burst open with a loud crack. A freezing wind rushed through the house, carrying that rotten smell. We backed into the corner. Children's laughter echoed everywhere. Come play with us. Come play. I remembered what Mr. Richardson said. You found papers with names. Where are they? In my truck, outside. We need those papers, and we need to get Danny out of here. I handed Danny to his grandfather. Run to the truck, both of you. I'll hold them back. How? I didn't know, but I stepped into the center of the room facing the stairs. Leave him alone, he's just a kid. The laughter stopped. Silence. Then whispers from every direction. You're not his family, you don't belong here, leave. I'm not leaving without Danny. The front door slammed shut. Mr. Richardson and Danny were trapped outside. I was alone. The footsteps came closer. Creak, creak, creak. I couldn't see anything, but I felt eyes watching me. Many eyes. Then a small voice sang softly. He's not ready to play. Not yet, not yet. The footsteps retreated. Creak, creak, creak. The lights came back on. The door unlocked with a click. I ran outside. Danny and Mr. Richardson were in the truck. He handed me a stack of old papers. Names, dates, faded photographs of children. We need to contact the police. Get these kids properly buried. I tried. They don't care about 80-year-old cold cases. I looked back at the house. In the upstairs window, small shadows stood watching. Danny whispered, "They're watching us. We're not coming back here. Pack whatever you need. You're both staying at my place tonight. We can't just leave." Yes, we can. And tomorrow I'm calling every news station, every investigator, everyone who will listen. Those kids deserve to be found, and Danny deserves to be safe. 1 week later, a forensic team arrived at the house. They found the remains of 7 children hidden in the walls and under the floorboards. The man who built the house in 1923 had been suspected of abducting children but was never charged. He died in 1932, taking his secrets with him. The remains were given proper burials. Families of descendants came forward, grateful for closure. Danny and his grandfather moved into a small apartment in town. The old house was demolished 2 months later. I visited Danny a few weeks after. He was smiling, talking more, acting like a normal kid again. "I don't hear them anymore," he said. "I think they're happy now." "I think so too, buddy." That night, driving past where the house used to be, I saw only an empty lot. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers. For the first time, the place felt peaceful, like a weight had been lifted. I realized then that sometimes the scariest things aren't the ghosts. It's the secrets people bury. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is bring those secrets to light.